first seat, yeah. Or second seat, I guess. Thank you. Second, I'd like to invite the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Planning from Colombia, Ms. Jennifer Mojica Flores. And then the First Deputy Minister of Justice of Georgia, Ms. Tamar Keshelashvili. And finally, from Sierra Leone, we have the Minister of Lands, Housing, and Country Planning, Mr. Turad Senesi. So, in my role as CEO of Landesa, I spend a lot of time trying to pitch the importance of land, but I realize we don't need to do that here. Everybody knows land matters. But at Landesa, we've been doing this for almost 50 years, and clearly that message is not reaching the world. Progress has been halting at best, and I guess we have to ask ourselves, why is that? What are the challenges that are getting in our way? Is it political? Is it resources? Is it capacity? Is it the culture? Is it technology? And why do we see certain successes happening in certain places around the world? What motivates governments to step up? And what have been some of their success factors? Those are the issues that we're going to try to look at today. And I'm going to start, I guess I'll sit down. So my biggest challenge today will be trying to get this all done in the 60 minutes allotted, because each one of these panelists could give a master class in land rights, I have no doubt about it. But we're going to ask them to try to limit their responses to 3 to 4 minutes. I know I'm going to have some help with a flashing card somewhere. And then that should leave us with time afterwards for a little bit of Q&A. So, starting to my left, Minister Yudhoyono. Quick background, you were appointed this year as Minister of Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning. You're also the General Chair of the Democratic Party in Indonesia, and you founded the Yudhoyono Institute, which is a think tank on democracy and prosperity. And of course, you have many other accomplishments, but we'll keep it to that for the moment. So recently, we know at Landesa that there's been tremendous progress in Indonesia, where we've started doing some work. And over 100 million parcels of land have now been mapped and registered, which is a remarkable accomplishment. I understand that another 26 million parcels will be registered in the coming year or so. And so I guess the question to you is, what's motivated this sudden movement around land, and what are some of the challenges that you've faced? And I want to just make clear, we're going to have 2 rounds of questions. So we'll start with the motives and challenges, and then we'll get to some of the success factors. So please.
Thank you, Chris. But before I answer your question, on behalf of the government of Indonesia, allow me to express our sincere gratitude for this invitation to this conference, and thank you for your continuous support to make Indonesian agrarian reform a great success. And we are grateful for your help to our communities impacted by natural disaster. So World Bank has indeed made a significant contribution to our systematic land registration program, which is fundamental for 3 main reasons. First one, this program provides legal certainty for landowners. The primary agrarian problem in Indonesia is the minimal ownership of land titles. So when, at my first day as minister, I flew to Manado, North Sulawesi. It's 3 hours flight from Jakarta. And I met this 80-year-old lady. Her name is Miss Adela. And she has been living in her house for half of her life, but never possessed any legal documentation until I gave her in person a certificate of land titles. She smiled in joy and relief, probably because this is the first time ever, after so many years, that she has something to be given to her next generation. So millions of Indonesian and citizens share the similar story with Miss Adela. And in East Java, there are thousands of farmers. So last we gave and distributed 10,000 land certificates to those 3 generations of farmers. Never had any land certificates before. And in Indonesia, of course, most cases, land ownership is hereditary. So for decades, this de facto form of ownership is considered adequate for many societies. Of course, this kind of mindset has led to many problems and conflicts, especially when land owners dies or there's a ownership changes hands, because land can be claimed and repossessed by other parties at any time. So to provide legal certainty, since 2017, President Joko Widodo has implemented Indonesia's systematic land registration program, which is directed towards promotion of justice and prosperity for all. And the second point, the land registration provides access to the economy. Indonesia has more than 65 million small medium enterprises, absorbing 97% of our workforce and contributing 61% to our GDP. So they are the backbone of our economy. The problem is they have a very limited access to capital. So when they possess land titles, they could actually and legally apply for soft loans from our banking system and other financial institutions. And in the end, of course, it will generate significant economic value added. And the third one, land registration also provides legal protection from the unlawful, unethical land grabbers, or more popular in Indonesia, we call it as land mafia. So last year alone, our anti-land mafia task force, which is a collaboration between our ministry and the law enforcement agency, we could decisively prevent over $800 million of potential loss from land-related crimes. But despite all these benefits, many remain reluctant to register their land because they don't want to bother with administrative matters and are concerned with the obligation to pay taxes. So first and foremost, we must change the mindset of the people so they could understand clearly the benefits of having land titles and the risk of not having one through socialization campaign effectively. And further, the systematic land registration invites community participation and also collaboration from private elements. This is very important because government has very limited resources, both in terms of human resources and technological resources. So for their part, our local governments are also encouraged to provide incentive policies. For example, by waiving the first registration tax. And this proved to be effective to drive people to register their lands. So in short, key to success in this endeavor is the cross-sectoral approach, which allows the synergy and collaboration among stakeholders. And one last point, Chris, the results are quite exceptional because in 2017, only 46 million land parcels have been registered. But today, currently, we have registered more than 112 million land parcels out of 126 million in total target. Meaning, over the last 7 years, there has been an increase of almost 250%. So, this is a very optimistic scenario, and hopefully by the end of 2025, we can achieve our target. Well, the statistics are nice, but again, this is about promotion of justice and prosperity for all Indonesian landowners. So I strongly believe that this systematic land registration program will bring about a better future for everyone in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Inspiring and full. In just a few minutes, you've given us such a good overview of some of the key factors and where you're headed with it. We'll come back to that. Now I want to talk to Minister Jennifer Mojica Flores. So you are the Colombian Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Before that, you were Director of Ethnic Affairs of Colombia's Land Restitution Unit. And before that, you were the Deputy Director of an organization that I know well because I worked there once, the Colombian Commission of Jurists. We know that in Colombia, there's been something like 50 years of conflict, and much of that has revolved around land. And recently, you had the peace accords that the government is now responsible for implementing. Maybe you can help us understand how big a role does land play in all of that, and what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Un saludo muy especial al Banco Mundial que siempre nos acompaña en estas políticas públicas que buscan transformaciones de la dimensión que compartimos. Efectivamente, la reforma agraria que el gobierno de Colombia y particularmente el gobierno del presidente Gustavo Petro busca es una reforma agraria para la redistribución de las tierras que repare a las víctimas del conflicto armado. Y esto pues es una reforma agraria sui generis en el mundo, porque no solamente implica la compra y distribución de tierras, sino también implica la necesidad de reparar a las víctimas del conflicto armado. Y en Colombia 10 millones de hectáreas fueron despojadas a sangre y fuego a las víctimas de la violencia colombiana. Me dicen aquí que todos necesitan traductor.
Todo bien.
Entonces, estaba explicando, entonces, es no solamente comprar tierra y repartir tierra, sino reparar a las víctimas del despojo de tierras. Y además en un contexto donde todavía estamos en conflicto armado, en un contexto donde también implica la reconciliación con la naturaleza, porque gran parte de estas tierras que queremos reformar están en territorios estratégicos ambientales. Nosotros tenemos un tercio de nuestro territorio nacional en áreas protegidas entre el bioma amazónico, porque lo compartimos a la Amazonía, está en zonas de páramos, está en zonas de ciénagas y sabanas inundables, está en un conflicto de uso de la tierra y de acción climática que necesita ser también resuelto. Y esa es la apuesta que tenemos, además de cumplir un acuerdo de paz que se hizo con los grupos armados ilegales en 2016 y que había trazado un panorama de acción en el que lamentablemente no habíamos podido avanzar muy bien. Nuestra meta es poder llegar a cumplir al menos la mitad del acuerdo de paz con los grupos armados ilegales de 2016, que es llegar a 1,5 millones de hectáreas compradas en reforma agraria. Adoptamos un modelo de reforma de la paz y de la reconciliación. Adoptamos el modelo de Corea del Sur en la medida en que compramos tierra voluntariamente y se paga al precio del avalúo comercial para no entrar en choques y contradicciones, en la medida en que necesitamos con esto gestar paz y no generar más conflicto, por ejemplo, a partir de modelos expropiatorios. Nosotros decidimos por voluntad política hacer una reforma agraria voluntaria, pero además implica todas las actividades junto con la tierra necesarias para la transformación de los territorios. No solamente es entregar tierra y repartirla entre poblaciones campesinas, negras o indígenas, o víctimas del conflicto, sino además hacer todo el proceso de acompañamiento para la reactivación económica y productiva. También queremos que esa producción hoy esté acorde con las acciones climáticas, que sea una producción adaptada al cambio climático, que sea una producción descarbonizada, que apueste por la agricultura familiar campesina, por prácticas de agroecología, por el aprovechamiento sostenible de los ecosistemas, y que además agregue valor y transforme las economías de esos territorios. Los territorios de la guerra, que son los de la reforma agraria, son territorios donde la exclusión y la pobreza es multidimensional, donde no ha llegado el desarrollo de infraestructuras públicas o sociales, en donde la desigualdad, por ejemplo, de poblaciones de mujeres es intolerable en este momento, en donde la pobreza en materia de seguridad alimentaria también afecta casi a la mitad de la población. Esa es la reforma que queremos. Tenemos una apuesta que además busca hacer una inversión nunca antes vista en los presupuestos que históricamente ha invertido el gobierno colombiano. Por ejemplo, entre el año pasado y este se han destinado 1.700 millones de dólares para compras de tierras voluntarias, con el ánimo de poder, a través de esta reforma agraria, cambiarla y transformar las situaciones de conflicto armado del país.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Moving to our third speaker now, Tamar Keshelashvili, and I apologize if I'm mangling the name. First Deputy Minister of Justice of Georgia. Before that, served as the Parliamentary Secretary and Legal Advisor to the President, and before that was a partner at MLK Law, which is a leading firm in Georgia. So, First Deputy Minister, a few years ago, the government started a pilot to register land, and more recently has scaled that up to become a national program. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what motivated that effort and what are some of the challenges that you've run into?
Dear Mr. Chris, thank you for the question. And before I will start answering, I would like to emphasize how happy and glad I am today to represent Georgia and the Ministry of Justice and the National Agency of Public Registry. I will try to stick to the timeline and not to take much time, because I know also being moderator and I know how it's important to concentrate on time. With regard to your question of your interest, I would like to tell you that Georgia consistently scored high on World Bank ratings. This means that we always performed very good in reforms, but to be named champions is a really significant acknowledgement, and thank you for this opportunity to talk in this international arena. And one of the main reforms which we are really proud of, and which is a priority of the Georgian government, is the systematic land registration, which you have correctly mentioned, that started from the World Bank financed pilot project. And my colleague from Indonesia talked about his personal experience, and I think that it's always interesting to tell something about from your perspective. And how was my first day 3 years ago when I was appointed at this position? The pilot project was coming to the end, and when I started to work in the Ministry of Justice and started to be responsible for the public registry, I found out that we had thousands of the cancelled or problematic applications from citizens. And we, on the one hand, we had very good expertise and knowledge and technical infrastructure financed by the World Bank, but it was a pilot project. And on the other hand, there was a whole country. And we started thinking about scaling up, and the decision was made, and this is a great decision. And now with all this expertise that we learned from the World Bank, now we are really able to do this excellent job, for all and at once. And I'm sure you know, the Georgian government inherited very, mildly difficult situation with regards to the title on the movable property and land registration, and we had to somehow fix this problem. And now we are at the stage that we started this systematic land registrations approximately 1.5 years ago, and we already surveyed up to 1 million land plots. Out of 1,200,000. Georgia is a small country, so this is a huge number for us also. And as for the registration, already 700,000 land plots are registered. And per day we are registering approximately up to 300 land plots, and are surveying approximately up to 400 land plots. And what was how we started, what we did, which steps did we take? It was firstly, it was legislative amendments. Also, we had a good expertise with the close cooperation of the World Bank team, which made procedures less bureaucratic, and it helped us in terms of timing. Also, the second one was that we strengthened public registries human capital. We started the pilot with 0 surveyors, 0. I would like to underline this. And nowadays we have 700 certified surveyors, and more than 100 of them are women, and this I'm proud, so proud because of this also. And with regard to the women, I also would like to highlight that, for example, in Georgia, the land title ownership on the movable property is we have very good balance. 49% of the land plots are registered on the name of women. This is also, I know that is the one of priorities of the World Bank, issue of the interest. That's why I'm emphasizing of this issue. And also we, for sure, it has to be mentioned that we digitalized all the registration process, and that was the step that we took. And once again, I will not take much time, and thank you for the question, and we're here to elaborate further.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Finally, Mr. Touret Sanesi, you are the Minister of Lands, Housing and Country Planning in Sierra Leone. Under your leadership as minister, Sierra Leone has passed two historic land rights laws. One, the Customary Land Rights Act of 2022, and the second, the National Land Commission Act of 2022. Two remarkable pieces of legislation. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what motivated those legal reforms, and what have been some of the challenges, particularly with respect to customary land laws.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me also, on behalf of my president and the people of Sierra Leone, extend our sincere thanks and appreciation to the World Bank group, because we are here today because of their support. In 2015, there was a document prepared in Sierra Leone, also supported by World Bank and some other partners, that has brought about the national land policy. In that document, it was recommended that Sierra Leone should enact those two basic laws, the National Land Commission Act and that of the Customary Land Rights Act. The simple reason for that recommendation was that there used to be a very chaotic land administration system in Sierra Leone. So at that point in time, it was resolved that if we are to get over the chaotic nature of land management in Sierra Leone, the only way out is to have a commission that will be charged with the responsibility of effective and efficient land administration in Sierra Leone. So 2015 to 2021, it was a long time, and taking over the ministry, I was under immense pressure from His Excellency the President to make sure that I move and fast track the process. So we started consultations across the country with civil society groups, ministries, line ministries, agencies, and then of course departments. So we started a conversation. We also had to make sure that we get the civil society groups to be part of the process, and they were very instrumental in the whole process. And then of course we have another very important group. Without them, there is no way we can get it right, and that's the paramount chiefs. In Sierra Leone, we have two types of land tenure. We have the state land, where you're talking about the Crown Colony, that's for the western area of Freetown, and of course the Ponce municipality. But then of course 80% of the lands available in Sierra Leone, you really find them in the provinces, and those ones are in the custody of the paramount chiefs. So without having a buy-in from the paramount chiefs, there is no way you can get it right. So it was a difficult task, but then with persistence we were able to convince them that the chaotic nature in terms of land administration in Sierra Leone, there is a need for us to have the Customary Land Rights Act enacted, and then of course establish an institution. That's the National Land Commission that will be charged with the responsibility of effectively managing lands in Sierra Leone. So we were able to get them on board, and we also had that consultation. Across the country, after the consultation, what we did next was to have a kind of validation workshop where we invited all parties, sit around the table, look at the contributions, informed by data, and then we came to the conclusion that we should go ahead to establish the National Land Commission and of course the Customary Land Rights Act. So Thereafter, as a minister, what we did was to have a cabinet paper. But before having a cabinet paper, we had consultation and concurrences from all other agencies, and then of course, the Ministry of Justice was very instrumental in preparing the bill. That bill was presented to the cabinet in Sierra Leone by my humble self. A lot of debates around it, and then of course, it was approved. And thereafter, of course, it was laid in Parliament for ratification, and then it became law in Sierra Leone. So we have the two documents, the two laws, the National Land Commission Act 2022, and then of course we also now have one again, the Customary Land Rights Act 2022, and of course their regulations. We also have regulations for both acts. So what we've done now is that we have those in place that are now the guiding laws that show us the pathway with respect to the management of land parcels in Sierra Leone. So having done that, we've made some, I'll come to the challenges, but I think we've also taken some steps, which I want to just maybe get through that quickly. The National Land Commission is now being established at the national level. That one is now functional. We've done some capacity building, of course, recruitment, capacity building, that one is ongoing. And then, of course, we are moving forward, making sure that we have also the regional offices established. That one is ongoing. And then, of course, we are undertaking some other reforms, which maybe as the conversation goes, I will have to also highlight them. But that is where how far we've come with respect to enacting those two laws. But the bottom line is that countries like Sierra Leone, developing countries, where, when I listened to my colleague just now, he said land grabbing. I thought it was just unique to Sierra Leone. To realize now that it is cutting across the globe. So my friend, we are in partnership fighting that particular battle. It's a difficult one. The land grabbers are everywhere. And until we have laws that will have to provide a platform, that will have to support actions, there is no way we are going to get over that. So that's how far we have come with respect to the enacting of those two laws.
Thank you. That's wonderful. This lineup is making it easy on me. Who said ministers can't be pithy? That was fantastic. That means there's a little bit more of a weight on the shoulders of the crowd, because we are going to have time for Q&A, I think. So please send in your questions. And we're going to do a lightning round now. And since we have a little time, though, I want to take us a little bit off script and just imagine yourself wandering the halls of the World Bank today or tomorrow, and you bump into a minister from another country, and the minister says, okay, we heard the talk, but what's the secret sauce? What really made it work for you? What's the innovation that we should be thinking of? There's got to be something that we could use for our own country to learn from your lessons. So I want to go down the row with that in mind, and I'm going to start with you, Mr. Yudhoyono. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. There are three key success factors that contribute to the achievement of our systematic land registration. First, it's the leadership and management. At the end of the day, it's all about effective, transformational leadership that is capable of translating vision into strategy into action by capitalizing all national resources. This is especially important given our country's size and complexity, politically, socially, and economically. With more than 17,000 islands, Indonesia is the largest archipelago. And with more than 275 million people, we are the fourth most populous country in the world. We are also a very diverse nation, a vibrant democracy. There are 38 provinces and 514 regencies and cities, each of which is led by elected leaders from 20 different political parties. So you can imagine the dynamics and the magnitude of challenges. Indonesia is also a member of G20. Our middle class is growing, but we must work very hard to uplift our brothers and sisters who are at the bottom 40%, so we can all escape from the middle income trap. So our biggest challenge is how we can balance our land allocation, that we can always support high economic growth, improving people's welfare, reducing poverty and inequality, while at the same time protecting and preserving our environment. And other crucial challenges are regarding the overlapping regulations, which could result in issues of overlapping boundaries, normally mainly between forest and non-forest areas. And it will be much worse, more problematic, when different maps are used by different ministries and government agencies. So prolonged conflicts may arise between landowners, be it individual citizen or corporation or the state itself. So leadership is key to effective coordination and synchronization among stakeholders, ministries and local governments to resolve those pressing issues. So by referring to the integrated regulations and one map policy. Since the beginning, our President Joko Widodo, has been demonstrating his strong political power, followed by leadership in action to push his administration to achieve ambitious goals. And his commitment has also inspired our local governments to take part and contribute. And also with meaningful support from the Parliament, we could together produce solid and sound regulatory instruments and budget allocations to accelerate this program. So again, collaboration for the second factor. I would like to highlight that the second factor of this success is people's participation and collaboration. Because we have limited number of land surveyors, our ministry involves private sectors who must comply with our professional standard. And this partnership has enabled us to conduct wide-scale land survey. And as for land data collection, it is achieved mainly through bottom-up community participation and in collaboration with chiefs of villages and local informal leaders. Of course, they all have been trained for this project. Some communities that practice customary law remain reluctant to register their land because they fear that they will lose authority or rights of their native land to the state. So to overcome this issue, we must approach them respectfully and in accordance with local wisdom and culture. So far we have issued communal titles for indigenous people in West Sumatra, in Papua and other regions. This policy brings legal certainty, economic opportunity, as well as environmental sustainability for the communities. And last factor, the third one, the adaptive approach to new challenges and opportunities. Our government is currently focusing on digital transformation in all aspects of bureaucracy and public administration, which include the implementation of electronic certificate. The process will be much faster, more efficient, more transparent, and safer for everyone. So we are targeting 104 cities and agencies to have implemented the electronic services by the end of 2024. We are also modernizing our hardware and software to catch up with the latest technological development. However, new technology requires new competencies and skill sets. Therefore, we have to continuously improve our professional and education system, which include to upgrade the quality and the productivity of our human capital. And finally, on climate action, we are currently reviewing and improving our land and spatial regulations to allow effective implementation of carbon trading. Not only such initiative will be able to mitigate climate crisis, but also it will bring economic benefits to all parties involved. Jobs will be created, new economic opportunities will be unlocked. So it will contribute to the realization of sustainable economic growth with equity, not only for Indonesia, but hopefully we can contribute to the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lots of helpful lessons already there. Moving to Colombia, Minister Mujica Flores, please, what have been some of the success factors in terms of resolving the different conflicts that you mentioned, and particularly around participatory approaches? If you could say a word about that. Thank you.
Sí, bueno, quería decir también como las lecciones aprendidas, porque Había hablado en mi primera intervención sobre la política de reforma agraria, pero yo creo que esa es una de las primeras lecciones aprendidas, y es que necesitamos abordar la conflictividad sobre la tierra, la tenencia de la tierra, de manera integral, que vea no como espacios segmentados las discusiones de la formalización de la propiedad. Mis compañeros de panel han hablado solamente de los temas de catastro y actualización catastral y registro en temas de propiedad y titularización. Digamos, en ese tema nosotros llevamos 25 años en una experiencia también con Crédito Internacional sobre cómo interrelacionar la información que reposa en las oficinas de instrumentos y escrituración y titulación con la información que reposa en catastro. Y tenemos 10, 15 millones de predios en este momento y una desactualización catastral enorme, con una tarea de poder generar la capacidad técnica y tecnológica de sistemas de información que permitan una actualización en vivo, porque es interesante cómo la tierra no se deja de mover todo el tiempo. El tema de titularización y catastro es uno de los desafíos, pero esto no solamente tiene que ver con la superación de las condiciones técnicas o tecnológicas o con el acceso a fotografías satelitales o con uso de mecanismos de precisión en georreferenciación, sino tiene que ver con todas las conflictividades, y es donde creo que es la mejor lección aprendida en Colombia. Nosotros tenemos que lograr hacer una intervención de catastro, por eso lo llamamos también multipropósito, que sirve no solamente para efectos de los impuestos y el tema de renta, información geoespacial y información de propiedad, sino también para resolver conflictos de uso, por ejemplo en áreas que son ambientalmente estratégicas, para resolver conflictos de despojo, que es el caso de la reparación a las víctimas del conflicto armado en nuestro país, que es creo que la principal problemática a resolver, y conflictos de productividad, que es donde tenemos también una subutilización de la tierra productiva que podría llevar incluso a decisiones administrativas en materia de sanciones a propietarios que incumplan la función económica, social y ecológica de la propiedad. Verlo integralmente implica un compromiso del Estado en pleno. Nosotros lo veníamos viendo en el pasado. La cooperación norteamericana de Colombia tiene una larga trascendencia en temas de titulación de tierras, por ejemplo. Nosotros dentro del acuerdo de paz, así como tenemos la meta de hacer 1,5 millones de hectáreas de redistribución, o sea, comprar tierra de grandes latifundios y repartirla, también tenemos la meta de 7 millones de hectáreas de títulos de propiedad. Y nosotros sí tenemos una legislación muy grande y robusta en materia de territorios indígenas y de comunidades negras, que son distintas categorías de derecho de las comunidades nativas o de gran descendencia. 1/3 de nuestro país hoy es territorio étnico, de poblaciones indígenas o negras, pero todavía seguimos con una tarea de avanzar. Pero cuando vemos segmentadamente los problemas, no podemos avanzar en titulación de propiedad, porque hay despojo o porque todavía hay derechos de comunidades nativas que no han sido atendidos. Entonces, primero, ver el problema integral y que la información técnica sea de múltiple propósito. Segundo, una intervención integral del Estado, pero esto demanda unas grandes inversiones en todo, en lo que tiene que ver con generar capacidades institucionales para que esto se pueda hacer rápidamente, para que no se desactualiza la información en términos de inversión pública. Como les decía, nosotros tenemos una inversión muy grande en temas de tierras, porque entendemos, como lo decían también en los paneles iniciales, que si no transformamos la tenencia de la tierra no podemos construir la paz, no podemos construir un desarrollo productivo, y eso demanda también resolver conflictos que hoy nos tiene la situación climática, y es cómo lograr hacer producciones sostenibles y adaptadas a los ecosistemas y a la protección de la naturaleza. Y allí nosotros tenemos también inversiones muy importantes en lograr condicionar los usos de los productores, de los propietarios a transformaciones. Cierro dando el ejemplo de Amazonía, por ejemplo. Amazonía, que es un lugar estratégico hoy para la acción climática mundial. Nosotros tenemos allí cientos de miles de población que desarrollan su vida adentro. Tenemos un problema de deforestación, para hacer tierras para ganadería extensiva. O sea, se tala el bosque amazónico para incluir vacas. Lo que tenemos que hacer es políticas de tierras que actualicen la información, que generen el catastro de la mano con una intervención de titulación de propiedad que permita también un control coercitivo del Estado sobre los ganaderos y tercero, una inversión pública para apoyar a esas personas que hacen ganadería para que hagan ganaderías sostenibles, para que recojan y hagan sistemas agroforestales, agricultura inteligente, que cambien y transformen sus actividades productivas en actividades sostenibles. Si no logramos hacer los tres, por ejemplo, ¿qué era lo que pasaba? Avanzamos en titulación de propiedad, pero eso lo que hacía era habilitar tierras al mercado de tierras. Entonces titulamos propiedad que después alguien compra y acapara y se queda con extensiones de tierra en la Amazonía. No lo podemos permitir. Tenemos que avanzar también en inversión y fomento productivo para hacer actividades que hoy el mundo necesita conforme a la crisis climática.
Thank you. Wonderful. Now we'll move on to our third speaker, Deputy Minister Keshlasvili. We understand that you've taken this pilot to scale now, and that technology played a role in that. I wonder if there are lessons that you've picked up along the way about deploying new technologies or something along those lines.
Yes, the investments were made in technologies for sure. And firstly, we started with ICT and hardware, and also development of the software to make registration process fully digitalized. And this helped us to decrease the registration time up to 70%. That is why we did such huge work in such short time. I would like to emphasize, just because they're showing that we have not made much time, and I try to be more concrete. I would like to highlight the main thing. We developed electronic minutes application. It was developed by the public registry in-house IT team. We have a really good team, and it has to be mentioned that in Georgia we always try to be at the forefront of the modern technologies, and it was always possible in Georgia to register removable property within the hours. However, we needed more, and that's why we did this electronic minutes application, which gives us the opportunity to connect to the public registry database at the real time to make electronic signature, to certify by the public registry certificate, etc. And the citizen can see everything on while in the process of the surveying, and that's why the time of the surveying and registration was dramatically decreased. But we are also oriented not only on the first time land registration, but this so-called further registrations like sale and purchase, etc. And now we are in the process of, it's almost over, in the process of development of the smart contract, so-called, because AI plays a really important role. What does it mean? Smart contract is on its way this moment. It is the concept when in the real time buyer and seller can conclude the sale purchase agreement, being in different countries or in different cities, and AI makes all necessary things like authorization, and the money are transferred at the same time while the title on the property is registered, because it's always a question, which one has to be the first. So we're in the process of this such kind of things, so with digitalization, and I will never, my colleagues will never forgive, and I will never forgive myself to leave this floor without encouraging all of you and inviting all of you to support us, because we have the exhibition in Atrium, and we would like, in the true spirit of international cooperation, to share our experience with the countries with the same challenges. We have a lot to say. My colleague and the representative of the public registry will have the more technical presentation on 70s, and I also invite you to present at her presentation. I will not take much time. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So, we're getting down towards the end of our time, but Minister Senesi, you were going to elaborate a little further on some of the institutions and steps you've taken, and I wonder if there's anything in particular that you would identify as a success factor in Sierra Leone or something that you would consider important? And while I have you, because there's a question from the audience, and I'll start with you if you want to go this way. One of the questions that seems to have popped up a lot from the audience is, how do you convince your Minister of Finance to invest in all this, because it's got to cost money?
Thank you very much. I'll come to that question, but then let me just take you back to the general question that you asked. I'll call it the push factor. How do we get to where we are? I'll just take it, use it to words. One is at the micro level and the other is at the macro level. The success factors. For land administration, effective land administration and management, at the micro level, there has to be the political will. The absence of the political will, there is no way you are going to get it right. So it requires leadership, right from the presidency coming down to the ministerial level, and then down to those that are going to be the technical staff to support that process. And when that happens also, there has to be a space created for the civil society to participate actively in the design of that particular process for it to succeed. So at the micro level, those basic partnerships that will allow collaboration must be there and encouraged, and there has to be leadership to prepare that. Now, at the macro level, that's where the World Bank, the Global Land Alliance, all these other big agencies, that's where they come in to give support so that there is experience sharing. You have learning sessions. Sitting here, I'm not a land economist, but then because of the engagement, Francisco is there, the other day we were in Rome, I had the opportunity to learn a lot more, which informed my decision with respect to action on the ground when I get back home. So there is a need at a macro level to get this particular forum where you discuss and you learn from one another. So that's very important. So for the success or the push factors, it has to be at the micro level, and then at the macro level, if we are to succeed in ensuring that there is effective and efficient land administration across the globe. You don't do it in isolation. You do it in isolation, you fail. So that is one. So I now come to the question of maybe what we need to do next in Sierra Leone, and whether there are challenges. Yes, there are. But let me talk of what we are going to do next. Now there is a National Land Commission established. We started having at the national level, there is a national office, staff capacity, we are improving on that. At the regional level, we are also getting there. But then, there is a need to also enact some other laws. The Adjudication Act that will have to support and resolve conflict, we have to enact that. Survey Act and rules, we have to do that. Because without those, there is no way we are going to start title registration. And title registration is what we need if we are to get over the conflict that we are experiencing in Africa with respect to land ownership. That's very important. Currently in Sierra Leone, we do not have a title registration. What we have is a conveyance. But conveyance in itself is just an evidence of transaction. We do not give you title to the land. So there is a need for us to start land title registration. But then again, the question is, how do you go about doing that if you do not have a system in place? So land information system, it has to be in place. So it makes use of what? Digital. Use of digital system, and then not only that, there are also old or historical records that we need to also digitize. So those are all the next steps we are going to take. And then of course, as I'm talking to you, I'm under immense pressure from the presidency that at least I should start title registration come next year. So we're having a lot of support from the World Bank and some other agencies for which we are very much grateful, and I must say it here. The World Bank, FAO, and then of course JICA, they are giving us a lot of support. So as I said earlier, the push factor is that there has to be that support, that collaboration at the micro level, otherwise we will not. Challenges are there, and what are these challenges? Funding gap. Funding gap. For example, we want to make sure that we establish land committees and at the chiefdom levels, district level, chiefdom levels, and of course town and village levels. In Sierra Leone, we have 190 chiefdoms. And if we are to have towns and village committees, we're talking about 20,000 committees. Currently, we have funding for just 6,000 land committees. So there is a huge funding gap there. So the question is, if I should now come to what you said, the response of our national government, Ministry of Finance providing. Of course, the resources are very limited. They are never enough. So there is a need for other international players to also come and support us. Because if we succeed, then we are going to succeed. All of us are going to succeed at a global level. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We still have a little time, and I've gotten some other questions from the audience, and so I want to address it to our two ministers. One question to our minister from Indonesia and from Colombia. There can sometimes be a tension when you are working with traditional authorities or customary lands that you title the land, but you also want to push an agenda around gender rights. You want to make sure women have the same rights as men at all levels. How do you manage if there's a conflict there between the customary traditions or the traditional authorities and what they would want to do and what the national government is prioritizing?
Yes, I think we must find a win-win solution, and we can do negotiation, and we must understand the local culture, the local wisdom, and we must respect them. But of course, we must make them understand too that we have national law, that we need to conduct in a proper manner. So, for example, when we distribute communal titles to our indigenous people in several parts of the country, like I mentioned earlier, for example, in West Sumatra and also in Papua. Of course, they do have and apply their native law, if you may. They have their own tradition and culture and their own belief, but again, we ensure them that this is a good intention from the government, from the national government, from the local government, so everything will be legal, legitimate, and it is good for them. And including how we can make sure that our women's right, for land titles and also the access to the economy is provided by the government, right? So by understanding this, I think more and more people, including the native people, indigenous people, wherever they are, will have trust towards the government. Just make sure that our approach is really respectful, and we must understand that they should not be the victims of any development on the ground. For example, at the moment we are developing the new capital city. We moved from Jakarta to East Kalimantan, and within that area there are some indigenous people who must be respected, and probably if they have to be relocated somewhere else because we need the land for development of infrastructure, then again they must understand the why, the how, and we must make them feel safe and still connected to the land. And this is the most challenging part, but again, there is always a ways and a good approach that we can do to make them understand our reason.
Great. Clearly some challenging concepts there. Do you want to say a word about that also?
Bueno, nosotros en Colombia la titulación a favor de comunidades étnicas o tradicionales o ancestrales, tanto para pueblos indígenas como para pueblos negros y afrodescendientes, se hace de manera colectiva. Son propiedades a título colectivo de la comunidad que además son territorios que no se pueden disolver, ni vender, ni transferir, ni generar transacción alguna sobre ellas. Se titulan a perpetuidad y ya la organización interna se rige por las normas de derecho propio de cada una de las comunidades. Hay una interlegalidad en materia de propiedad de la tierra. En Colombia, desde la Constitución Política de 1991, se reconocen las normas de derecho propio y consuetudinario de cada una de estas comunidades indígenas o negras y afrodescendientes. Ya en la titulación a favor de comunidades campesinas, pues creo que es uno de los resultados más importantes que hemos tenido en el gobierno nacional, y fue lograr que el año pasado se incorporara dentro de nuestro texto constitucional, dentro de nuestra constitución, el reconocimiento de los derechos de la población campesina, también como sujeto de especial protección constitucional. Hoy en Colombia, los principios y los derechos de los pueblos campesinos y de las mujeres campesinas, como quedó en la Declaración de los Derechos del Campesinado de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas, están introducidos en nuestro texto constitucional. Y eso hace que frente a comunidades campesinas y frente a mujeres tengamos la obligación desde el Estado colombiano de promover un acceso equitativo a la tierra, en el caso en que la propiedad la sustente una pareja de un heterosexual, o garantizar el acceso a la tierra de las mujeres también reconociendo su economía del cuidado, es decir, hacia adelante en explotaciones económicas que no generen rentabilidad ni ingresos económicos, poder reconocer las actividades de cuidado de la tierra y uso. No obstante, tenemos un punto de partida muy negativo. De los propietarios de la tierra, solamente un 30% son en cabeza de mujeres, y suele ocurrir que cuando se adelantan acciones de propiedad y de titularización siempre sale el hombre cabeza de familia. Es una obligación nuestra. Acabamos de aprobar un programa de acceso a tierras especial para mujeres, y tenemos que seguir trabajando intensamente en reconocerle a mujeres que suelen ser excluidas, como las mujeres campesinas, como las mujeres niñas o adolescentes o jóvenes, o como las mujeres de tercera edad.
Fantastic, and we know this is important not just as a matter of equity, but when women get the secure rights to title, they tend to invest in their families, their communities, their villages, so the importance of women's land rights. I'm glad you touched on that at the very end there. One thing that has come up in all of the discussions is the importance of convincing stakeholders, whether it's traditional authorities or civil society or farmers you mentioned might be concerned. And so I want to just give Minister Keshilashvili one last chance here. What has been a key stakeholder that your ministry has had to convince in order to get the titling rolled out?
In our case, the situation was as follows. The society, the civil society, understands very well the importance of the title over the immovable property, because we have different history. We gained independence 30 years ago. We lacked these titles, etc., and the society knows very well. The main, the stakeholders was other state authorities, because not only the Ministry of Justice and the Public Registry is involved in the process. Also other ministries like Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Agriculture, they have to participate and coordinate very well, but they have their own agenda. And our processes were really accelerated with the help of the World Bank, with our expertise, and we were like step forward other ministries, and we had to convince that we can do it together, because we really need to collaborate very good. And after that, I'm really glad that for the government, it became top priority. The funds were found, but this was not a matter of money with this case. This was a matter of the expertise that we gained, and all these people, human capital, as I have already told you, and their expertise and knowledge which is invested in this project.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much. I unfortunately have to close this down now. I told you at the beginning that one of our panelists could have done a master class and we could have gone for all day. They did really well to just keep it within their shortest time. And so I want to thank all of them for the rich material that we managed to get out in 60 minutes. And if I could ask everybody to please give them a hand.